Hey, today I'm fortunate enough to sit down and talk with Abreante Jones. She is a law student at South Texas College of Law with me, and I find her to be an extremely interesting person who has a lot to offer and a lot of good, solid opinions on a lot of different topics. And we're going to try our best to address as many as we can get to and dig below the surface level on a few topics. Hey, Beyonce, would you like to introduce yourself? Give us a rundown.
Okay. So, hi guys. My name is Abreante, as he said, and he pronounced it correctly. I'm currently in my second year of law school at South Texas. Before that, I was in the military, active duty Army for 7 years as a paralegal and deployed twice, was in mainly infantry units. So I am in the law and I am all things girly, but I'm also extremely tough because of my military background and open minded. And I think Ben's awesome, mainly because he's extremely outspoken whenever he does have opinion, but for the most part, he's silent. And so I thought that that was cool because it's like you never speak. And then when you do speak, oh, you speak.
Well, if you're going to say something, it needs to be worth saying. The way I feel about it. Um, so this is my take, and you can feel free to correct me. I feel like, from my experience in law school, is the majority of the people there come from a position of privilege, right? Um, a lot of them haven't had to go through the financial struggles or experience a lot of the just life stress that that I feel I have anyway. I mean, I'm older and I've just naturally been through some more things than a 20 something who's just progressed through the educational system. So when I'm in there, when I'm in that class, I recognize that uh, my my struggle is just a different struggle than other people's. I have different responsibilities. I've been through different things. I have a life of experience that's pushed me to this point, and not all that has been flowers and cupcakes and things that tasted well, right? When you set in, I have my idea from my understanding is that you may see that in a similar fashion.
Definitely. Um, for me, when I first sat down, I felt out of place because you look around and a lot of our classmates come from money, like you said, and not even just money. It's privilege. I think that's the appropriate word. And then you look at my story, and I fought tooth and nail to sit in that seat to even have the ability to learn, and the odds were stacked against me in doing so. Um, Financially, from finances to race to gender, I am very much an anomaly shaken together and put into law school. So sometimes I find myself having to remind myself that I am allowed to take up space and I do belong here and I am just as qualified as my classmates, albeit they may be more privileged. um, and that's just my take on it. But I think that the struggle is what ultimately makes the experience that much sweeter for me.
So you mentioned kind of feeling out of place at times and convincing yourself that you belong there. And I know that you're part of the Black Law Students Association, right? That's the I got the BLSA correct there. Okay, and recently they held a panel where guests were talking, and they one of the things that they were discussing was the imposter syndrome. Um, would you mind kind of elaborating a little bit on that? Because I believe you basically just hit on it a little bit. Would you like to dive into that a little bit more?
It is. I can say what it is for me, and it manifests differently for different people. But it's this feeling of not just not belonging, but recognizing that this space was never designed for you to occupy in the first place. And so now that you are here, and you're surrounded by people who, for the most part, don't look like you, don't come from your socioeconomic or cultural background, you get this feeling of fraud, I guess, because you're forcing yourself to be a part of it. Almost like you shouldn't be there because I was never supposed to be here. Um, that's the feeling I get at school. That's the feeling I've gotten when I get blessed with these jobs and I'm the only brown skinned person in the building. And I notice that I should be happy, right? Because I'm attaining this level of success that I've always wanted. But there are those nagging feelings of this room was never meant for me to occupy. And I think that that's the gist of what imposter syndrome is.
So what what has contributed to installing that mindset that when you do find yourself in these places that you don't belong, like just because the color of your skin is darker than the people who originally made the institution, or the thought, you know, the stereotypical image of the student when the school was designed, just because your skin color isn't that, doesn't match that, fast forward to now and you're sitting there in class, though be it there's, you know, you're far outnumbered as far as race goes. How does that mindset travel from then to now, if I'm
Um,
making sense? I'm hoping I'm phrasing that
no,
properly,
it
right?
definitely makes sense. How do I combat it and get to this place of allowing myself to be present in the moment and accept it? Is that what you're asking me?
Well, how do you go back? How does the mindset that you don't belong get put into you in the first place?
Ah, so I think it's from a very young age. I think a lot of dark skinned people come from this idea that mediocrity is what you should strive for. You get what I'm saying? And that's not just in general, that's in education, that's in your lifestyle. And so when you get someone, when I approached my family about wanting to go to college, right? That's an anomaly. Graduating high school in 3 years, an anomaly. These aren't conversations that are welcome in the household to begin with. People look at you like you have a third eye. When I said that I wanted my academia to be my ticket out of poverty, people laughed and grinned, and it wasn't as encouraged as I've heard that it is in other households. And that's not to say that I didn't have parents or family who supported me. Of course, once they saw that I was serious and that I was going for it, they learned to embrace it. But it definitely wasn't the norm, and it isn't something that they expected. And so now to be in grad school, everyone's shocked, and there's so much pressure because it's not normal, it's not usual, it's an anomaly. I don't know too many people from my hometown of Franklin, Louisiana, who've finished their bachelor's degree, let alone went on to pursue a law degree. So it comes from the upbringing. And then as you grow up and you progress through the school system, you have teachers who are trying to fit you in the spaces where they're comfortable with you being. They're trying to put you in the classes where they feel like you should occupy, that you'll relate to people in those classes better than you might relate to them a grade up or an AP. And it kind of just continues. And over time, you get conditioned to feel like maybe they're right and maybe I'm crazy to want to be in this esteemed space, if you will.
Okay, so at what point does that change? At what point do you say, okay, I killed high school, I I I ran through college, I did great in college, I'm in a very a law school that's looked at in a very good fashion. You know, a good reputable law school, and I'm kicking ass while I'm here. At what point do you just say, hey, I don't only belong, but I'm kind of owning this?
Um, I think that was a personal journey, to be honest with you. Even in high school, I was played all the sports, graduated number one in my class, still didn't feel like I was worthy. In college, graduated top of my class, active duty, still didn't feel like I belonged. Went to all these beautiful programs and did very well. And I still struggled with feeling like I didn't belong. And so then I was like, maybe it's not so much with how I perform and as it is an inward struggle of recognizing that, you know, other people's prejudices shouldn't become my own. So I think that it was when I finally sat in it and allowed myself to admit that it hurt, that other people felt that way, allowed myself to admit that I had allowed them to condition my own thinking. And then I was able to start taking steps towards I do belong here. I am the bee's knees, and you're going to feel me.
Well, I think you definitely do, and you definitely are, and that's very true. Now, I can relate to the things you're saying, not as far as the race goes, but as far as just feeling like you don't belong, right? Um, when I first got out of high school, I went to the prisons and I worked in there for a long time. And while I was in there, I had just kind of assumed that college was probably just not my thing. Probably wasn't going to do well in college. I'm right where I need to be. I can be a old knuckle dragging, prison guard, rough and tumble kind of guy. I guess that's just my path, you know. Um, and then my that path got jerked out from underneath me, and I ended up was already in my mid 30s when I made the decision that, look, I'm gonna go and knock out school, see what happens. I'm just gonna have to work extra hard, and I get in there, and like class after class after class, it's an A, it's an A, an A, an A, and eventually it was like, man, this really isn't that hard. I was thinking this was going to be a big, huge challenge, and like
Oh,
the challenge is to go to class. The challenge is to do the readings. The challenge is to give it the attention it needs. It's not so much that the material is hard. And I was just thinking that this stuff was going to be beyond me. And uh, so the whole time I'm in my undergrad, I'm thinking, oh, well, apparently this isn't that hard, because I'm doing really well. It just must not be that hard. Uh, and I graduate, and then I get into law school and kind of go through the same process, right? Kind of go through the same, well, these are where the real smart people are.
yeah.
There's no faking it here. I got to really, really be on it. And the grading system is so scary. And it's like, man, I'm just going to get ran over, right? I'm going to get exposed. And then, like, I mean, you win some and lose some, but that's just law school. And I'm looking at all these people, and I know that they're all smart, or they wouldn't be there, right? They're all good at this world of education, and I'm watching them all struggle. Uh,
Right?
and so after watching people just fall apart that first semester, I was like, hey, well, I'm just kind of, I mean, I might I might not do great in this class, but I'm making an A in this class, and I'm right there with everybody. So um, it's literally taking me until I'm in my 40s to where I believe that when I walk into a room and I put my effort towards things, I'm capable of doing what everybody else can do. Uh, and it's that's a big challenge. Of course, I didn't see that as a racial thing on my end, and the the mentality for me was probably self-inflicted. Um, my brother's very successful. My sister just got a PhD from Oxford. My father was very smart. My mother's very smart. Like I come from a family who's you sit down and have a conversation about almost anything, and somebody's going to be able to respond in a nice, intelligent manner. But I was always the goofy one. I was always the, the goofy guy, party guy, rough and tumble guy. That was mine. So when I started venturing into this other lane, I was really, really, really scared. And it took me, like I said, until now to kind of become comfortable with it and see everybody as my equal, as opposed to me like feeling like I'm chasing them. Uh, is that similar to what you just explained?
Yes, I think that that's the best way for you to put yourself in these shoes. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because your conditioning, while it was influenced by factors that were going on around you, it was more so self-inflicted, like you said. And with the racial piece of it, I didn't really have control over it. You know what I mean? And my parents, bless their souls, didn't prepare me for it. So at a very young age, I got identified as gifted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I go into this program where I'm the only brown girl. They pay for your private school, or, you to go to this accelerated program, right? I'm the only black girl in the black person in the class. I think the only other two brown people was one was the janitor and one was a lunch lady. And I recall sitting in that room, and I think that was my first brush with imposter syndrome, but I didn't know it yet. And I remember one of the kids saying, "So, does this mean other black people are going to get to come here?" And I'm not old, so this was like fairly new to me. And I was just like as a child, you're like, dang, so
Now, what
I'm
age?
the exception.
What age was that?
I think I was maybe 7, 6, around there,
Early, early.
early.
Okay. And you got through high school. Did you go straight into the military after high school, or did you go to college first, or did you go to military and college? How'd that work?
Basically, I attempted to go to college, and then it became very apparent to me that I am one of five, and my mother cannot afford to go to college. So I got into Harvard, and I was excited. I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is everything I've been working for. You have this moment where you're just like, and then after I got accepted, in the packet, there is something, you get a packet of how much it's going to cost to attend this prestigious institution. And I had a choice to make, to bury myself in loans and go, or not go. And at the time, my mom had 5 kids and she was already struggling. And I knew that it was selfish of me to even expect her to contribute. And so I made the decision I learned that the military pays for college. And so I was like, this is great. But when I got in, I realized they didn't pay that much. And so I ended up going elsewhere. But yeah, that's kind of my segue into how I decided to go to college. And then when I did it simultaneously while I was on active duty as a paralegal.
So how does that work when you're active duty as a paralegal? You are also deployed, right?
Yes.
So what does a deployed paralegal do?
Well, soldiers misbehave no matter where you put them. They will assault each other. They will be soldiers. They'll be late. They'll be disrespectful. And in a deployed environment, there's always going to be, unfortunately, sexual crimes and things of that nature. And so, as a paralegal, it was myself and a junior paralegal and an attorney who I worked for. And we basically were the legal team for a large portion of Iraq while I was there. And we
So how
just
much of that helped prepare you for what we're doing now?
I am prepared to be in the legal profession because of it, but it does nothing to teach me how to memorize civil procedure or, you know, it gave me work ethic. And I would say my writing style, learning how to kind of vary my writing styles.
Mm-hmm.
You have to learn that because you get assigned a new attorney all the time and you're writing on their behalf. So you kind of have to learn to write in the voice and the style they prefer.
Mm-hmm.
So in that way, I feel like I have a leg up because every time I get a new professor, I just treat it as if I've gotten a new attorney. So I know what to expect as far as when I enter the legal profession. But as far as law school goes, I'm on just as legal level of playing field as everyone else. And actually, I think I'm starting a little bit behind because I had to erase some of my what I thought I knew. So I'm not a clean slate like everyone else is because military law and civilian law, though they share parallels, are not the same.
When you get done with school, would you entertain going back into the military as an attorney?
No.
Okay, what's your plan? Do you have
Uh,
a plan?
I
Feels
would,
like as we progress through this, plans change as we go. So what has your plan changed? And if so, what was it? And what are you looking towards now?
yeah, my plan has changed. So I thought I was going to come to law school and kind of swim in the middle. I honestly didn't want to. I knew I was going to give my best, but I was like, in reality, you'll probably swim in the middle because geniuses come here. Have to be real with yourself. And so when I got there and I started doing well, and people were like, we want to pay you money to work here, I was like, well, then this changes things. Initially, I wanted to be a prosecutor, and I still do, but I was just of the mind that we need more people with my background in the DA's office, and I ultimately want to end up being the DA.
Mm-hmm.
But then I got my first check. And this is very like hard to admit out loud, but I have a son who I need to put through school, and I would like to build some generational wealth for him. And some opportunities provide me the opportunity to be a litigator and to provide financially for my child in a way that I would like for him to grow accustomed to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that I'm going to lean towards big law for a few years, perhaps a clerkship, um, embrace it, own it. And then once I feel like I've learned everything I can learn, I would like to transfer over into being a prosecutor, being a DA. And then when I retire, I will open a small criminal defense firm where I will select the clients that I like best. And another reason why I want to go big law is because I didn't intend to become a philanthropist, but I like to think like I'm this budding philanthropist now. And it's like I have the itch to always help people. If I go and get a big law job, guess where? That's what I can funnel money into these causes and these communities. And, change costs money. So if it means that I have to take a detour, then I'm willing to.
It's good. I like it. You sound like your plan is a little more hashed out than mine. I'm like, I'm gonna get out and I'm just gonna wing it and go hard and like scoop up and dig in and make a go at it. Uh, and whatever, we'll see. I'm still kind of up in the air. I like the idea of criminal defense. I really like the personal injury tort type stuff. Seems fun. But I feel obligated to do some criminal defense just because I've sat in that defendant's chair and I've experienced what it's like to realize that the attorney that I paid doesn't care one bit if I walk out of the courtroom or if I get escorted to the back of the court. Uh,
Exactly.
and knowing that it's a real humbling experience when you sit there and you realize that the only person in the courtroom who cares, genuinely cares, if you get to leave or not is you. It's it's kind of a real slap in the face. You know, it wakes you up and makes you realize like this stuff ain't fair. And you know, there's so many aspects of it that are not fair that it turned me off from wanting to go into like the prosecution, just because like I know that they're just kind of taking what's given to them and piecing it together and doing what they feel is right. But there's so many levels to it, and if it's corrupt at any one level, then it's just corrupt, you know.
And that's exactly why I want to go. I started off wanting to be criminal defense, but my 7 years was primarily on the prosecution side in the military. As a prosecution, we choose what you're getting charged with. We choose the max. We choose the worst thing that can happen to you and the best thing that can happen. We choose to drop the case. We have the power. We hold the cards. Criminal defense is just that. You're on defense. You know what I mean? So you already have less ability to affect change. Not saying that it's not important. It is extremely important to have people who care in that chair. You need strong people on both sides, though, for it to work. And so understanding, I had to sit with myself and battle that stigma and say, are you the one who's willing to go into that line of fire? Because, of course, my culture is going to have things to say. Oh, you saw what they did to Kamala, poor thing. You know what I mean? Granted, everything she did wasn't cool, but a lot of the hate was just because she was a prosecutor. So,
You know, I like most things, I try to just stay level with, you know, try to stay in the middle and see things for as they are. And I thought if the Democrats could sweet talk Michelle into being the VP, that'd be like game over, right? Like there's
right?
just throw it all away. It's a done deal. It's a wrap. They didn't, and they named Kamala. I was like, that's less appealing than, of course, Michelle, but just in a general sense, less appealing. Just the the things that she did do. I'm never going to beat anybody up for just doing their job, right? Because that's just their job. But certain aspects of it are I find to be pretty gross. Uh, the the shifting evidence away with the guy on death row. That's pretty gross. The um, working hard to keep people in the prison for the lower level drug offenses, nonviolent low level drug offenses. We're going to keep them in prison. And her response was that she needed the cheaper labor. The state needs the cheaper labor, or the free labor, or whatever it was. I found that to be pretty gross. All that being said, they could have done a lot worse. I just feel like in general they could have done a lot better, not just her particular, but
The whole ticket.
yeah, the whole thing. I feel like this is not near as raunchy of an election as 2016, but it's like, you know, all you got to do is like make it across the living room without stubbing your toe.
Yes.
But instead of just standing up and going across, they're shutting off all the lights. They're blindfolding themselves, peeling off their shoes, and telling you mix up the furniture. Now let's see if I can do it. You know, like, why are you making it so difficult on yourself? I don't understand. But whatever. I'm not a political analyst. I'm just somebody who looks at things, you know, as level as I can anyway.
Exactly. And I think that that's like what makes me, that's why I'm able to talk to you, even when your opinion is different, because it doesn't come from this like flaming place of ignorance. It's always like, I am trying to understand. And Sister Kamala, while I love and appreciate her for pursuing something that is difficult for both women and women of color, I do not condone a lot of what she's done. In that same vein, if I'm making a choice, the choice is evident, because I think the whole ticket could have been better, and that's on both sides. So at this point, we you know, you go to war with the army you got, not the army you want.
Right. It's that's fair. Honestly, I don't hold it against anybody, whoever they voted for in 2016, because that was just, uh, boy, that was just a hot mess all the way around. And I just can't be mad at anybody for choosing to pick whoever it is they picked on that go around. Um, and like I said, this isn't as near as, it's not an ideal ticket. Um, you got Trump spinning out of control doing Trump things, and then you got Biden looking confused a lot of the times. Like it just seems like they could have just done better. It seems like they could have done better. I don't know. That's
Yes,
either
I'll
here
leave
or
it at
there.
that. I think we can
Don't want to
agree.
spin off too far down that rabbit hole, but it is what it is, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so when this is something that there's 20, I believe this number is right, like 22 veterans a day commit suicide.
Mm.
Um, and I feel like, oh, I've never served. I know a lot of people who have. I've had a lot of people work for me who have. I've worked for a lot of people who have. I've just been around many people who have served, and I see them go through this process of trying to readjust to society. Um, and I really don't think the military does a great job at all of helping these people go from that environment, especially the people that have been deployed, that have been through some combat and had to been forced into action, uh, from them being deployed to them being a citizen expected to go get a job and go grocery shopping and stuff. Um, I think there's a big break in the way that transition occurs that contributes to that horrible number. When you got out of the military and were transitioning over back into civilian life, what was that like for you?
Um, my transition was planned very carefully, as you might imagine. So it was somewhat seamless, but and also I started law school almost immediately after. I created a scenario to where I wouldn't miss a check. Like I wanted to jump right into school off my last contract and my last deployment. In fact, I extended because the attorney that I worked for was particular that he wanted me to deploy as his senior paralegal. And he kept asking. And then I was like, you know what? You could use some tax-free income before you go to law school. And so I extended and went. So when I came back, it was like boots off from deployment, get out of the military, go to law school. It wasn't until I was in law school and my battles were no longer around and I was having all these feelings and I couldn't express them to anyone, that I realized that I was mourning the military a little bit. And for someone who celebrated leaving and was like, whoa, out of here, it was hard. It was so hard. And, you know, I have people soldiers, battles, who I've lost to suicide, and I empathize and understand it. You know, that transition is terrible. It's terrible because you go from surrounded by family. The people to my left and right, I can not stand their guts. I can literally despise everything they stand for. But if we deploy, I know they've got my back. You're never going to find that level of camaraderie, no matter how far you search. Mm-hmm. That kind of just family, you don't get it. And once it's gone, you feel a little bit exposed, I'll say.
So when you were in the military and around uh, that structure, did you feel race was less of an issue or just the same?
We have plenty of racists in the military. I don't speak for the military, of course, blah blah blah. But there are so many racists in the military. Some of the soldiers I worked beside and had the best working relationship started off racist. And I think this is the beauty of the military. I'll never forget this white guy told me there were no black people in his town. And he told me all the negative things that he thought about black people. And then I reminded him that I was his supervisor and that he was still going to have to do as I said. At this time, I'm a corporal, so it really didn't mean anything, but I was going to say what I had to say. We worked together for about 2.5 years, and after about a couple of months, I became the exception. Oh, Black people are ignorant, but this one's not. Black people are less than, but this one's not. After about a year, he was like, maybe she's not the exception. Maybe there's something to this. Maybe I was misled. Mm-hmm. A little bit before he left the military, I'll say, he came to me and he was like, I was so hell bent on thinking that Black people were using the system. They were lazy. They were ignorant. He was like, I never even questioned it until I met you. And he was like, thank you for not writing me off. I didn't have the option to. If I was a civilian, there's no way I would have worked with him, had a relationship with him, spoke to him. And even in the beginning, there was animus. I was like, oh, you're racist? I'ma show you. But the military forces you to confront that and find the similarity and work together.
So I think that's a key thing in general. I think that's a lot of just the intensity that we see from the racial divide that everybody knows is there right now. I think a lot of that is stemmed basically off of the interactions online, from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever the case may be, because all you get is the one harsh opinion of the other, and then they go away. There is no forced interaction to where, like what you just described, like I'm around you, you're around me. We have to get past this surface level understanding or opinion of each other and, grow. But the need for that is huge, but the opportunity for that has shrunk to almost nothing now. And so how do we get society as a whole to have that interaction that gets past that surface level opinion about things? Because a lot of people are from places like what the guy you just described. A lot of people are from little towns with only one or two minorities in them, or even in the big cities. Honestly, like I grew up in a very small town. I grew up in a town with 600 people in it. Currently, it had 540 or something when I was in school. And my graduating high school class had 33 people in it. But when we did something, it was all of us in there doing it together. It wasn't it wasn't a white people do stuff over here and the Black people do it over there. It was, if you're part of our group, you're part of our group. In the big cities, the large schools, there's an opportunity for people to isolate themselves. They stick to their own groups. So even though they're surrounded by other cultures and other groups, they go away. You went away.
Sorry, my computer decided to just shut off. It's at 98%. I don't know.
Oh, no worries. It happens. This is the Zoom era, and error. It's whatever. Yeah. So how do we bring people together to where they mush up? That's part of your thing, right? Like you're in the BLSA, you're in the Women's Society, you're in every society that the school has to offer. You have a resume that lists 14 different organizations that you're part of. Like, how do we make it happen?
Okay, so here's my thing. I think that so we are in an era of like zero tolerance, right? I think that people are so fed up with social injustice, inequality, and no change, no progress, or if there is change, it's very minimal and it's not what's necessary to really, remedy the issues. And so You have one side that's frustrated, angry, desperate for change. Then you have another side that is unable to empathize and listen. And so I think that there's going to require a tolerance for conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So, first and foremost, if you're coming to a conversation or a situation with hateful speech and you're not coming from a place of understanding, then it never gets fixed. This conversation was doomed from the beginning. But if there's a conversation of genuine understanding and I want to know, I want to get this, and you're willing to listen, I think that we would see a total 180. I I find that a lot of my friends, I'm willing to talk with the head of the Ku Klux Klan if he'll have me, because I believe that the way to change minds and hearts is to be in the room, to take up space, to allow them to see the error in their ways first, in their thinking firsthand. I honestly believe that. Um, but not everybody does. And so it's hard because how do you tell someone that you should tolerate this? Because that's the difference. In the military, I don't have a choice. I have to tolerate you, whether you're my boss, whether you're my soldier. I can't say I'm not willing to train the soldier because he's racist as hell. I mean, he better not act on that racism, or of course he'll get kicked out and punished. But he can just express, hey, I grew up racist. And what am I supposed to do? He hasn't done anything towards me. He's just letting me know. You're forced to deal with it. I don't think you can. I don't think there's any kind of situation we could even emulate for the rest of society that replicates that.
Right. I think how you were saying that the message to have people be able to come together and just say, I'm going to tolerate hearing something I don't like for a minute, and building off of that, right? Like just having your mind open enough to understand that you're about to say something I probably don't like, but I want to know why you feel that way. Um, that would be a huge step. And I feel like there was a couple of opportunities here recently where that door was cracked open for just a second, and when people started to kind of peek through it got slammed on us. The uh, Ahmaud Arbery
Mm-hmm.
situation, I think, was one where people can just look at that for what it is and say, well, that's not good. What's happening here? What's going on? Why aren't these guys in jail? This seems really shady. What's all the shadiness around this? And to follow that up with George Floyd, where everybody looks at that, and when they see the video, everybody who saw the video initially was like, man, that's really hard to watch. This is disgusting. These cops need to be held accountable. This is just no good. Again, the door's it's creeping open just a little bit to where we can start having these discussions. And almost immediately through the riots and all the a lot of the just the riots, we'll just stop there, because I think almost everybody understands the protests, but the riots, now where it gets murky is people who don't want to see the difference between the riots and the protest don't. So when they'll say, oh yeah, well, there was a just cause, but then all the riots, well, that's, I can't listen to anybody who's burning down their cities, and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, but that, it's like 80% of people that were arrested based off the riots were not even from those cities. They were
The majority of the protesters are peaceful.
right. And I know that the people who I talked to about the protests, the ones that were going to it and the ones that were active in it, they were there when they were supposed to be. They moved where they were supposed to move, right? They went down the streets they were supposed to be at. They participated in the activities that were scheduled. they got their message out, they said what they needed to say, and they were home by the time they were supposed to be home. And then the riots come. Uh,
Right.
they're two very separate things. I'm sure there's some mingling that goes on from one to the other, but for the majority, the protests were peaceful and just trying to get the word out, and then the riots come and just paint a horrible picture about everything. And it really made it difficult for people who weren't necessarily wanting to receive that message of something they didn't like. It that really made it easy for them to tune that out.
Yeah.
uh, and then and you fast forward just a little bit, and then we get to the Jacob Blake situation. And I'm telling you, I don't see one side that's right on the Jacob Blake situation. Like, when I see that, I see a guy who, there was a justified shooting. Now, 7 shots can be, I think, excessive, but the way it was described to me is that once deadly force is authorized, there's no such thing as excessive deadly force, which I don't really get. I believe that every bullet you fire, you should be accountable for that bullet. And but that's the only discussion I see in that whole scenario, if I'm being honest. And then you got this kid running around. He's underage. He has a gun he's not supposed to have, and he ends up killing people. I don't understand why people are rallying up to support him. I don't understand why people are rallying up, treating Blake like this is something we can plant our flag into. Like, both sides are losing respect in my mind in that battle up there. And when we bring in stuff that's not, that there's a lot of question marks around, um, like with Floyd, that was pretty clear. There was some bad stuff going on with Ahmaud Arbery, pretty clear, bad stuff going on. But with Blake, like, to me, it seems like there's a whole bunch of flare up just because people are emotional right now. But under
I
normal situations, that's not really something that would cause a bunch of uproar.
I think that the reason why this is at a head, it's because this problem isn't new. It's not. So everybody matters. Literally, everybody that drops matters. The fact that he was walking away and that the officer grabbed his tank top, and then still, there's a bunch of officers with weapons drawn, if I'm recalling correctly, and still feels compelled to shoot this man in the back 7 times. That's, I'm not a police officer, but I do understand the terror of, I don't know what he's reaching in the car for.
Yeah.
I have a family to get home to. I am concerned for my safety. I'm not invalidating it. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is that I believe that as an officer, you should have what we call an escalation of force. Downrange, there's no way that even an infantryman wouldn't shoot so suddenly the way that we are being shot here on domestic soil. That's the issue. And so if you are this police officer and you are charged with protecting and serving, and you have physical contact with the person who you believe to be a threat, you clearly are able to make that physical contact. Why are you unable to neutralize the threat? Where is the lack of training? Why is it that we've trained our police, and I say we because you have to accept the country wholly and totally. Mm-hmm. Why is it that we've trained our police to use lethal force, and we allow them to rely on their judgment? You make judgment calls every day. A police officer who's unfamiliar with a large Black man, his unconscious bias is gonna alert, on top of he's already on high alert because he's a police officer. That is where you get these shootings that don't look objective. We don't have a one set standard. And then add on top of that the incident that happened with the guy, who was clearly a threat, and him being able to be brought in safely. So it gets difficult. to
It does get, I
be
understand
objective.
that it definitely is difficult and touchy, and I don't think you're not making any wrong points. Although when I first saw the video, my question was, well, why are what I have not been a police officer. I've been in corrections for a long time, and I can take a lot of my experience in that field and kind of apply it to the other. And when they're there, so when I first got, let me start there. When I first became aware of the whole Jacob Blake situation, it was from a tweet that I saw where it says a man broke up a fight between two girls and was walking away to his children, and a cop
Mm-hmm.
shot him in the back 7 times. And I'm like, ooh, that sounds rough.
That
You know?
sounds terrible.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely horrible. And then, of course, without even looking for it, you just go up the thread a little bit, and bam, there's the video, right? And I'm like, well, that's a very poor um, synopsis of the situation. Like, the cops were clearly telling him to hold up. He was at a spot where he was standing there, and there was a standoff, and you don't really see what was going on there, but it doesn't really look like he had just broke up a fight. And the way he's walking back to the car, and the cops are like, you can see the cops yelling at him, and you can see weapons drawn, and you're like, well, this seems like there's a little bit more going on here than what that one little tweet said. But you watch it and you're like, well, why didn't they just tackle him? In my mind, if I have a guy who's unarmed and he's sitting there and I'm telling him to do something and he turns to walk around, my first move, if I'm not tasing him or something like,
And I think they did
cop
well.
has
The police
tasers and
report,
cop has
yeah,
all that kind of stuff. And so, like, we didn't have any of that in the prisons, right? But if I'm telling the guy to hold up, you wait right here, turn around, or get against the wall, or whatever the case may be, and he doesn't do it, and I feel like he's doing something that could be threatening to somebody or could be dangerous to somebody, my initial reaction is to go and physically get control of him. And then if he resists beyond that, then, the force can escalate. But, that's penitentiary mind. My first thought was, well, why didn't they just tase him? It seems like they should have just tased him. And then
I think
after,
they did take
yeah,
them,
after a
or there's
while, I
been
see where
conflicting reports.
what I can't figure out by the reports is if they effectively tased it, like if they hit him, right? Like it says
Right.
that they fired their tasers. Nothing tells me if they hit him or not. Like there are people that those are ineffective on certain situations. They can, but I don't know. It doesn't say that it was it doesn't say that it hit him. It doesn't say it didn't hit him. It didn't. Maybe they missed. I don't know.
Yeah, just
Um, but then so okay, well I guess they tased him. So that or tried to, and so that kind of makes it a little less bad on the officer's part in my mind, right? They did at least try to use the progression to force, right? You start out with show of force and orders, uh and from that point you use your less than lethal and you progress up, right? So and then he's clearly walking away from him and he's going to the car. I don't know what he's going to the car for. It looks like he's not trying to get in the car. It looks like he's reaching into the car. And all that being said, I can understand why that officer pulled the trigger. I don't know that I understand why he pulled it 7 times, but I do believe that the actual shooting, the first shot, is that's going to be something that it's not even going to be difficult for him to justify based off everything else I just went through. Now, I would like for there to be a situation where he has to justify shot number 7, because if you shoot him 2 times, you're basically point blank pulling the trigger here. I just don't see why you would need 7 shots to subdue somebody. But the first shot I feel is justified. If we're going to be upset, I feel, me personally, believe that it should be in the amount of shots, not that a shot was fired or anything that led up to that. And I although I believe that there definitely should be some questions, he should have to give up some answers, and there should be a revamp on policy if that is the policy, that they can, once they pull the trigger, they can just unload the clip on somebody. That's something that's not good. But I also feel like that's not necessarily the cause, the call to arms right now that the country's needing. And I guess I can understand that, like, every little bit that gets pushed forward can be seen to help, but sometimes it doesn't. So if you have, again, somebody who's not wanting to hear these things that they disagree with, and then you show them this as some sort of evidence of racial injustice, they're going to say, well, he was being an idiot. He was running around not doing it. They tried to tase him. They did this, they did that, right? Like, it's a very easy thing for them to block that off. Whereas Aubrey and Floyd weren't. Like, they had to work hard to find a reason not to pay attention to Floyd, right? Like, they had to dig up 5 years worth of or 20 years worth of criminal history to say, oh, well, we don't want to deal with him because he wasn't a great guy.
But what I think, right, is the problem is, if someone wants to find a reason to justify it, they will. You and I both know, like, every argument has a counter argument.
Mm-hmm.
And so for most of us, we have our mind made up on the position. And this is what frustrates me about the whole thing. People have these line drawns, and it's like, I'm supposed to sit on this side of the line if I'm not racist, and I'm supposed to sit on this side if I am racist. And when these situations come up, there's no wiggle room. I can't say, oh, well, I shouldn't say, oh, well, that shooting was clearly wrong, and that is exactly what our cause is about. But this one is not wrong. You get what I'm saying? So that's where the tension comes in, because both sides are like that.
Right. And right, on one like side, every shooting is wrong.
And then on the other side, there's always a justification.
There's always some way to justify it. Right.
And the truth is in the middle. I do believe that every single life lost to police brutality that didn't have to be lost is unfortunate. Mm-hmm. And the numbers of Black bodies that are falling are highly disproportionate to the amount of that we make up of the population, because a lot of people like to skew that and be like, more white people are shot. Well, yeah, there are more white people in the world.
I saw that put out there, right? And they took all the little numbers right off of the government website, and they posted it, and that was their point, was, well, look, there's there's more white people killed by cops than Black people. And then there was white people, and then Black, and then Hispanic, or Latino, and then other, right? There was other, and then this is the most disturbing part. There was this other, this a whole nother category down at the bottom that said unknown. Yeah. And I'm looking at it, and so the whites were like 240, and this is for the last 4 years or something like that. And the numbers were pretty similar for all years. So like it was 240 white people, 150 Blacks, call it 75 Hispanics, 40 others, and 200 unknown. And I say, well, what the hell is
it's unknown?
What the hell is an unknown? What is this? This is 20% of the data. How is this not in there somewhere? What do you mean unknown? And they send me the explanation back that, oh, well, that's because their driver's license doesn't say their race, or that they chose to not put the information on their driver's license, or they were like biracial. And, it was 50-50, could go one way or the other. So they put them down in unknown. And I've done some statistical, I've done some research and had to run statistics. And That's 20% of your data. That's not okay. That changes everything. And
Exactly.
it doesn't matter what they have on their driver's license. What matters is what the cop who pulled the trigger would describe them as. And I would be willing to make a wager that most cops who are pulling the trigger in those unknown people would not describe them as Caucasian. They'd be probably described as a black guy or a Hispanic guy. Like that's what needs to be. That's where the data needs to come from. Is the police report, not the driver's license, but apparently all the big call of arms to will they kill more white people well they might not because they might
And,
not because we got to redistribute these 200 unknown uh people into the numbers and see where that it falls.
and even still, there's the fact that white people proportionately make up a larger portion of the population.
Oh yeah, of
Than,
course. That's just the easy way.
and,
That's the
and,
obvious
and
part.
then, to your point, that point stands. So proportionally, there should be more, but there may not be more once we find out who these unknowns are. You know what I mean? If we ever find out who these unknowns were.
No, I doubt we will, but that's just when I saw that was the very first thing that stuck out was unknown. What the hell is an unknown and why are there so many of them? And then when we get to finding out, it's like, well, this is completely unacceptable. You can't use any of these numbers as proof to anything because this is all just junk. This is garbage until you figure out what this unknown stuff is and
Can't
put
rely on your data at all.
yeah, this is all fraudulent make believe nonsense, silliness. But yeah, I don't know. When I see the Jacob Blake stuff, it makes me feel like it's. I'll tell you what I do. What it reminds me of when Black Lives Matter, the organization first started picking up steam. The first time I heard about it anyway was in Ferguson with Michael Brown, right? Now, that whole situation seemed a little bit one way or the other to me as well. When it was first coming out, it didn't seem right, but there was a lot of activity going on. People were responding to it. And almost at the same time, there was the kid in Ohio, a 12-year-old, I believe. Was he 12?
You're talking about Tamir Rice?
Price, yeah, who got killed in the park playing with the BB gun when the people called the cops and told him he was playing with what they thought was a BB gun. And they showed up and within a second and a half had shot him a whole bunch and killed him up right there in the park. And it's all on video. That was happening almost at the same time. And the fact that all this effort and energy was being invested in this situation that seemed kind of suspect from the beginning, and almost nothing was directed towards this child who was gunned down in a park playing, was mind-blowing to me. To me, that was just like, man, they're firing up this organization and they've decided to stay down here and rally the charge of this guy and basically ignore this child up there, where I think it should be completely the other way around.
So I think what happened was Tamir Rice's. It's very similar to how George Floyd and Marbury, and then we have subsequent deaths, right? And then Breonna Taylor, excuse me, I said Breonna Rogers, yeah. But we have the subsequent deaths come after, and then the names become less important, not because the people are less important, but because the cause is growing and the message gets louder. And I would say that Tamir Rice's name made noise. It didn't make as much noise as Michael Brown's, but that's because there was already so much noise. You get what I'm saying? I think that regardless of how you slice it or whose name leads the charge, the message is clear. And so if we're gonna, talk about which death, which shooting was or was not justified, I think we readdress the crux of the issue, which is black bodies are driven, queer bodies, and a lot of times it's not justified. And why is that? And how do we remedy that? And then maybe you can quiet the noise to get some people to the table. Because I don't think that there can continue to be this, you know what I mean? There's not going to be any rational thought if you're not remedying the issue that I'm bringing to you, which is, why are you shooting and murdering Black men in the street, predominantly Black men and Black women? Why are you killing them in the street, and you're somehow able to restrain and bring in your white suspects, or your white suspects alive?
So what I think is, every problem can kind of be stacked on top of another, right? And what sometimes the problem that we see is generated by the problem that we don't see. And I feel like the greater problem that is easily addressed is that when these things happen, that officers step outside of their duties and do things that are clearly against policy, clearly against the law, and end up killing someone, white, Black, brown, or whatever combination of race happens to be on the catching end of that bullet. There's too many times no repercussions for that, or minimal. Like there's they operate with this immunity, and that is the actual problem. The fact that they can end up killing someone and not be held accountable for it. If they were held accountable for killing someone, for killing a Black person, killing a white person, killing a brown person, if they killed somebody unjustly, they end up in jail or in prison, just like if I did or you would, if we go off and kill somebody. Then I'll guarantee you there'd be a whole lot less killing going on. They'd be a whole lot more careful. They'd be a whole lot more, they'd have to realize that they are in the right before they go to pulling the trigger. They'd be way more interested in the chemical agents and the tasers and the physical force than they would be pulling out their service weapon.
I definitely agree. I definitely agree that they need to be held accountable, regardless of the race.
Right.
Because their job is to protect.
The idea that they can go without being held accountable allows them to express their biases in this way. And so the lack of accountability leads to the average officer going around knowing that they can get away with this. And so they then express their biases or act on their biases. And now what we have is the obvious problem of this disproportionate amount of Black people being killed by cops and still not being held accountable. The way I see the problem is it's an accountability issue, and if you can correct that accountability issue, you can correct a whole lot of the behavior.
Yes, because if you give someone free rein to express their hatred, then they will.
Then they're going to express their hatred. Exactly.
That and what we don't want, but what we see happening is the police force is becoming a mod KKK. It is. So if someone is in the military, I'll liken it to my experience. If someone's in the military and they have these negative biases against
you broke up just for a second. You kind of stuttered there for when you were saying the police force, and then you ended with the KKK. Just repeat that little chunk so everybody's on the same page moving forward. Sounded important. It sounded like a hot take. Come on.
I was saying what we don't want is to see the police force become a modern day KKK.
Okay, gotcha.
If someone's in the military and they have these anti-Islam, anti-Muslim, anti-ideas, right? Prejudices, biases, they're not allowed to take them out. They are more than aware that if they shoot or use deadly force against anyone, that they will be punished severely. In fact, there's been talk that soldiers are almost afraid to use their weapons. They want to be that sure because the punishments are so severe. Mm-hmm. If we could just take that, carry it over to our police force, I guarantee you that at least we could keep the biases in check as far as using lethal force. Granted, Rome wasn't built in a day, and we're not gonna cure racism. Yes, that is my mini.
His little face popped up in the corner there. Like, hey, he looked tired. Oh.
But
oh, fix him.
He gets really bad allergies, and then he just thinks I'm supposed to wave my wand and cure pollen.
Got the magic mama skills.
No, the cure is bedtime is close, and so yeah. All of a sudden my allergies are acting up. But to my point, I think that if we could take what we have in the way of escalation of force and accountability in the military and kind of emulate that in the police force, then we'd be cooking with Crisco. But unfortunately, we don't have that in place. And it's just like what you said, people are exercising their bias.
I got a take on how to improve police brutality. Coming from a corrections background, I would say that I would prefer to have a shift full of women with just a couple of dudes when things really got heated and like we needed to run around and throw action around. That let us, but in the prison you got to have a little muscle from time to time, right? But the average female officer was able to diffuse situations in a way a male officer just couldn't, mainly because when a male approaches another male and starts telling them what to do, there's an immediate instinctual reaction of this testosterone challenge, this you only going to be able to tell me what to do because you got a uniform on, because you got that badge, or because you got that gun. You take that off and you ain't nothing but a punk, and I can take you out. You never tell me what to do in this way or that way. And like there's this natural challenge that comes when a male is telling another male what to do, right? And then you add that with the very real possibility that there's some problems with authority in the first place. And then you add that the police officer might not be handling this stuff in an ultra professional manner as well. And what you have is this unwillingness to compromise and this, a battle of bravado going on. And a female just doesn't get involved with that. It's like, look, this is the way it is. You and most males are not willing to jump physical with the female. And it's not the natural challenge that's posed when a male is telling another male what to do. They're there, and those are people that cops have to deal with a lot of times. The guys who will physically challenge a female, but there's also, that's when you have your spray and your taser and your weapon and things like that. I think a way that we could see some very, very positive change in the way that these physical confrontations come about by not allowing them to come about is simply making a conscious effort to hire good quality female officers and allowing them to take the charge more often on these types of situations. Not saying that these male officers are bad officers or incapable officers or anything like that. It's literally just a natural situation. When I would say that if you look at any statistic you can pull from a police force anywhere, from a prison anywhere, from any environment that has this type of interaction, that you're going to see that the male it involves these male forces, these male egos going at each other far more frequently than females when females involved. I think if you did that and also made a very conscious effort to hire people from the areas that they're going to be policing, both of those put together, and you're probably going to be making a big difference at that point. But by doing those two things, I feel like you can really solve a lot of problems, because people who come from the areas that they're going to policing are going to know the mentality of the people there. They're going to know the struggles of the people there. They're going to be able to communicate with them on a level that, where if I went to work for HPD and they assigned me to Sunnyside, you know, I can go there and have all the great intentions in the world, but immediately I'm going to be looked at as an outsider. I'm going to be looked at as somebody who's just coming in there and have every stigma that they have attached to me, right? But if they can make a conscious effort and find somebody who's from there to be willing to come and be an officer in that environment, they could probably start really making some good headway. Plus, it gives the people that are there, gives the young people, the youth, people to see, people that they know that are now in positions of authority in their community, and people to emulate that are not drug dealers and you know, negative influences.
Right.
If we start supporting the communities by letting the community support itself in these types of fashions, I think you could start seeing some major headway.
I agree. I agree with that, especially the second part, about having people police themselves, having the communities police themselves. I also think that first we address the problem, right? And then ideas like yours, like the female idea, I have never heard that before, ever. I never even, I know of female friends who express their frustration with not being able to be, I guess, a street cop, a beat cop, whatever it's called, and the difficulty associated with being respected in that position, given the authority to control the arrest if they are partnered with a male partner, et cetera, et cetera. I think if those things are remedied in the work, that's a whole nother situation. Then yes, you do have a more balanced power dynamic that helps to get at this issue. And then of course there are other issues with the having people from your own community, because some communities are very, very antagonistic toward their own. It's almost worse than if you showed up. That, you know what I mean? Like, what, you're one of them, because of this adversarial narrative that's been created. But I think once you get past that, then yes, there is I understand what's going on here. The person policing doesn't have the misplaced fear sometimes, because they know what's going on, and they're able to handle the situation a little bit better because of that. And then on the other side, there is a level of familiarity and care. This person cares, and they really just want to restore balance to the community. And so I think that ideas like what you said are huge to this conversation. And I think more people need to come to the table and hear and first address that there's a problem. If you can address that there's a problem, then you've gotten over the initial hurdle, because human instinct is to fix problems. And I think that that would get us on a better path than we are on now. But we have people who still refuse to see a problem.
Well, I mean, that's first step in recovery, right? Is admitting
Admit you
the
have a
problem.
problem.
Right. All right. Well, I asked for an hour and I got about an hour and a half out of you, and I don't want to take up any more of your evening. Maybe I feel like there's still tons of topics we could run through, though. Maybe we'll have to do this again sometime.
Definitely. I really enjoyed talking to you. And just remember me whenever Let's Talk About It blows up.
Let's talk about
it. Yeah.
it. Good deal. Good deal. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Take care.
Go tend to your little guy's itchy eyeball.
I will. All right. Bye bye.